Hello, in today's video we got this 2013 Chevy Malibu with a few new codes, which we had just taken care of a couple cam actuator codes a few weeks back. But for this one we'll be starting with the Misfire code, which will hopefully also take care of the remaining codes as they appeared at the same time. And this unfortunately also triggered the service Stabilitrak, which unfortunately put the car into limp mode, making it hard to drive since it wouldn't want to accelerate. So the first thing I do is check the misfire monitors to verify that that's the only cylinder that's misfiring, which based on the current misfires is the main one misfiring. In the history it does got a few random misfires from other cylinders, but it's probably related to the fact it's going into limp mode. So I'll start by removing the engine cover. This will give us a better look at the components that may be affecting it. And for this we'll be using a T30 Torx bit to remove the 3 screws that are holding it. Now with those removed, let's remove the oil fill cap, which also holds it down, followed by removing the cover. Now reinstall the oil fill cap. After verifying nothing visually wrong, I'm going to swap over the ignition coils, which tend to be a common failure on these cars, so I'll swap coil number 2 for coil number 3, and vice versa. And based on the different color of the third ignition coil, one's already been replaced. But with the misfire monitor, I'll be able to see if the misfires change to that cylinder. If so, we just swap out the bad coil. If not, we can dig further. But if you don't have access to a misfire monitor, you can also use a spark tester attached to the ignition coil to see if it's firing or not. Anyways, continuing on, we push up on the red lock clip that keeps us from pressing in on the connector tab. So with that moved up and disengaged, all we do is press in here as we pull back on the connector. And now we can do the same on this next connector. With both of them disconnected, we use a 10mm socket to loosen and remove the ignition coil hold down bolt on both of them. Now with both of the bolts removed, we can swap the ignition coils. If your bolts come out with this rubber retainer piece, just use that bolt with the corresponding coil. First, let's remove ignition coil number 2. Now remove ignition coil number 3 and move that one to cylinder 2. And now place ignition coil from cylinder number 2 to cylinder number 3. Now install the bolts. And now tighten them down with the ratchet. And lastly, connect the connectors. With the ignition coil swapped, we run our misfire monitor, and voila, the misfire swap location, telling us that the ignition coil is the source of our misfire. If this wouldn't have worked, I would have did the same with the spark plug next, but I didn't have to in this case, so now we just order a new ignition coil, and that should fix the problem. Now if you don't have a scanner that allows you to do this, you can pick up one of these spark testers that connect between the ignition coil and the spark plug. This will allow you to see if there's spark coming from the ignition coil without affecting the spark to the spark plug. It'll have this light that will trigger every time that a signal passes from the coil to the spark plug. So every time it flashes, it means that the spark plug is firing. Now if you're not getting the spark from the coil, this light will remain off. Now you'll want to verify that's the ignition coil that's bad and not the signal to the coil. And to do this, all we gotta do is connect the coil to the cylinder 3 connector, and if it does the same there, we can be sure that it's the ignition coil and not the signal. On the other hand, there are a variety of ways to test for a spark signal. Like this one that I've used on many of my other videos. This one grounds out the housing, allowing us to see the spark, but unfortunately, on this one if you're testing the signal from a coil or a wire on a cylinder that's operating properly, this test will cut out the signal in the meantime. Instead of just replacing the ignition coil, I do swap back to the original position of the number 3 ignition coil. I do this mainly for future reference, that way I know where the misfire was and which ignition coil I put in to fix it. I did get a brand new Denso ignition coil to match the remaining ones, but not sure if they changed the design, but it is the dental coil it calls for. It may not look like the others, but nevertheless the functionality is what matters. After tightening the bolt and reinstalling the connector, here's the moment of truth. Start the car and check the misfire monitors, hopefully for the last time. Well, the car is definitely back to smooth idle, running good, and the misfires are gone. And with that, our video is done. Hopefully this video was helpful and informative. If so, please click that thumbs up button to support my video and my channel. And please subscribe if you haven't done so.